Jim Jones, Styles P, let's talk about it. Verzuz started out as how much body of work you got, how many dope-ass singles you got, right? Then it grew and progressed into having levels to this shit. It's sort of like boxing. You think you're gonna mash somebody the out until them lights come on, it's a different story. Styles P said, I'm a barsmith. It's levels to this shit. Meaning, look, I can go on my bag with singles, but I can also go on my bags with body and shit, as far as freestyles. Can Jim Jones do that? Maybe he can. Have people seen Jim Jones do that? No, they haven't.
All you gotta do is pull up here. You know, you wanna join me? Pull up and join me. You know what I'm saying? Pull right up here and you can join me. I'm on live.
It was vicious. Not just humorous, when Jadakiss and Styles P clapped back at Jim Jones live on television. Following the Dipset Verzuz LOX clash, a Harlem rapper attempted to maintain his dignity. However, what began as a straightforward argument descended into a lyrical assault that had everyone in the hip-hop community laughing and nodding in agreement. Everyone was reminded by the LOX why their names are still well known in New York. That unadulterated street power combined with unadulterated talent. Let's reminisce about that historic evening when Dipset and the LOX faced off on Verzuz. It was intended to be a festivity. Flash versus bars, Yoner's grit versus Harlem swagger. It was hailed by fans worldwide as one of the most significant events in New York rap history. An actual contest for the throne. However, things quickly got out of control after those mics started. There was no performance by the LOX. Their purpose was to conquer. Styles P delivered the kind of unadulterated hunger that only true MCs possess. While Jadakiss had that crazy control and energy, the audience was going crazy. Dipset, meanwhile, appeared disorganized as they talked over one another, rapped over backing tracks, and relied too heavily on their chains and past memories rather than their performance. Next came the Who Shot freestyle, which was released by Jadakiss. The energy immediately changed as he hit that verse. "We're in New York, man," he said to the audience. The entire room erupted when someone said, "This is real rap." Jim Jones's confidence was actually ebbing away. Dips attempted to retaliate with a few blows, but the damage had already been done. Everyone could see that they were completely outclassed in front of the entire culture. Jim Jones attempted to use his trademark tactic of talking his way out of the situation after all that public humiliation. He appeared on a radio show a few days later, attempting to justify the loss by stating, "We weren't prepared like them. They practiced. We only came to have fun, but it didn't sit well with anyone. Not the fans, and certainly not Styles P or Jadakiss." And you know what? Jim was still speaking when they happened to phone into the same radio program. Things were really humorous and embarrassing at that point. Jadakiss immediately hopped on the queue and said, "Bro, there are no excuses. You were grilled. We arrived at work. You all gathered to take pictures." For a moment, the entire studio was frozen. The host was attempting to keep it together while busting up. Then laughing Styles P sprang in and twisted the knife. The Harlem guys all wore identical attire, but they couldn't remember the song's lyrics. The entire studio went crazy. There was a lot of raucous laughter. All but Jim.
They asked me how I felt about what was said about me on another platform from some other people. You know, that sounds like I'm not a troublemaker.
You could hear.
His voice was filled with frustration. He attempted to maintain his composure by claiming that it was all friendly competition, but the harm had already been done. It was the tone, not just the words, that made that on-air encounter so painful. He wasn't being attacked like an enemy by Jadakiss and Styles P. The thing that hurt the most was when they reminded him that he had slipped, speaking like big brothers. They didn't have to cuss or scream. The serene assurance spoke for itself. With every remark, they exuded confidence, composure, and surgicality. Total command. No breath was wasted. Jadakiss stated, "You guys thought this was a fashion show," as he stared directly into the camera. "We believed it to be hip-hop." That one line quickly became famous. Social media exploded. Every timeline was inundated with TikToks, memes, reaction videos, and countless quotes. Months later, people were still reliving that moment because it was so iconic. Jim attempted to retort, saying, but it didn't land. We had the bigger hits. Styles P gave him a remark so succinct that it ended the argument. Bro, you can't out that bars. You cannot overcome adversity by dressing up cold-blooded. The LOX returned each time Jim opened his mouth with greater confidence, calmness, and sharpness. They had not argued. He was being educated by them. This wasn't only about pride, as you could see. It was about protecting authentic hip-hop. That day, the internet fell down. Some fans posted Dipset made New York look soft, while others crowded the comments with statements like, Jim got humbled twice. Once on stage, once on air, that hunger returned because of the LOX. To be honest, they weren't incorrect. Verzuz was more than just amusement. It was the LOX's moment. There was a complete revival. Overnight, Jadakiss became a living legend. And Styles P showed everyone why he is regarded as one of the most revered MCs to have ever touched a microphone. That night revealed something far more profound for Jim Jones and Dipset: the distinction between authenticity and image. In actuality, Jim has always prioritized flair over focus and style over bars. Harlem is well known for its flair, the attire, demeanor, and fluid speech. But the flash doesn't come to your aid when it comes to demonstrating your abilities. The LOX stepped in with unwavering devotion cultivated over decades, tight synergy, and pure discipline. They arrived with too much pride, vanity, and nostalgia. Dipset. The LOX didn't simply walk away with a victory because of this. They left with the respect of the culture. Jim made an effort to mend things after that radio humiliation. He wrote on Instagram, "It's all love." Everyone was aware that New York had triumphed in any case. Simply put, damage control. It was evident in his subsequent interviews. The man was injured. Additionally, he began making light-hearted remarks about Jadakiss, stating, "I could outwork him in the gym, but not on stage." However, that only made matters worse. He appeared to be trying to deflect criticism of the defeat by moving the goalposts. As soon as they saw it, fans began yelling at him. Even the devoted followers of the Dipset had to acknowledge it. Jim's pride was still limping away from the scene after the LOX had cooked them. The most amazing thing is that Styles P transformed it into content gold rather than merely letting it go away. He shared videos, joked about it, and maintained the same composed demeanor that further deepened his admiration for his admirers. An L was converted into entertainment history by the man. When Styles P appeared on his own podcast following the chaos, the internet burst out laughing. He chuckled at Jim Jones' continued attempts to fabricate an account and offer justifications. "There's no spinning the truth, bro," Styles remarked. "You were cooked. It's all right. Move on after taking your L." He stated it this way: calm, and somewhat amused. Made it even more painful. Then he added the now famous statement, "Harlem had Prada." We were under pressure. Social media was immediately dominated by just one quote. Within hours, fans were remixing, reposting, and making it into a meme. Jadakiss, meanwhile, was engaged in an entirely different activity. Jada was moving like a boss, performing constantly, unleashing incredible freestyles, and selling out gigs all over the nation while Jim was still out here defending himself. You can truly tell who won in this way. When one man continues to fight his defeat while the others receive compensation for winning laps. It didn't end there either. Rappers began to add their voices as well. "Hey, I told Jim the LOX different," Mayo stated live. "That's war rap versus workout rap." During an interview, Fat Joe even interrupted, laughing and referring to Jadakiss as the commander of New York. Jim was reminded of that event everywhere he looked. It was impossible to avoid. It was incorporated throughout his entire narrative. Like, I followed him everywhere, regardless of what he did. The unfortunate thing is that Jim secretly wished for the same level of respect that Styles P and Jadakiss enjoyed. He wasn't merely looking to establish himself as the flamboyant hustler or hype man. He desired to be recognized as a legitimate MC with a reputation and bars. However, it's challenging to restore that reputation when you're demolished in front of millions of people. Fans will never forget that mic check, no matter how many mixtapes you release or how many inspirational sayings you post. While the LOX continued to enjoy their victory, Jim remained out there months later, attempting to change the narrative. Jim Jones persisted in promoting his version of events, stating that Dipset had the larger repertoire, making vague references to a potential rematch, and even disparaging the LOX by suggesting they practiced excessively. Fans, however, weren't amenable. Being prepared is a quality of excellence, not a sign of weakness. The LOX arrived ready to perform, locked in and focused. The true distinction is that Dipset arrived prepared to pose. Craftsmanship versus hype versus comfort hungry. Those Verzuz videos reappear online every few months, and the comments are as lively as ever, while mocking Jim once again. Younger fans who weren't even alive when Dipset was at the height of his popularity are now referring to Jadakiss and Styles as P-legends. That was the depth of this L. It's classic. The humiliation was passed down through the generations. And to be honest, it has a poetic quality. Jim devoted years to demonstrating his status as the epitome of Harlem pride and the center of New York. However, it was two Yonkers veterans who brought to the world's attention the appearance and sound of authentic New York rap. Just raw bars and a reverence for the craft, no flash, no gimmicks. What transpired between Jim Jones and the LOX was much more than a simple rap feud. It served as a direct cultural check. One man was not the only one humbled by Jadakiss and Styles PA. His whole mindset that has been infiltrating hip-hop for years was humbled by them. That kind of thinking that claims following fashion and phony excitement are more important than discipline, bars, and breath control. Because Jadakiss remarked, "Y'all rapping over your own vocals," after glancing at Dips during the performance. He wasn't merely making fun of them. He was criticizing a whole generation that had lost interest in the art form. No diss track could compare to the impact of that moment. It was the unvarnished, real truth.